Good morning. Today's daf is daf Lamed Aleph in Menachot. We are on the bottom line of Lamed Amud Bet. Let me share my screen and we will get started. We are, yesterday, we noted that Rabbi Chanina said that the halacha is always like Rabbi Shimon Shazuri wherever his opinion is taught. And the Gemara wondered, where was that statement made? Now, the statement was said in connection with our Gemara, where the discussion was about, find it, that it was in connection with the space um, uh, between the when we whether or not we need to have the name, whether the name of Hashem can be between lines, noting the fact that we can put the name of Hashem between lines in the Torah. If the scribe comes to the end of the line, realizes that he forgot Shem Hashem and began the next line, you can sort of put it there in the full name in the margin, so to speak. And so the question is maybe that was where, and we rejected that because we have other people who note the fact that the halacha is that
Yesterday
way.
we were saying that you could put the question is you could put his name above the line between the two lines. It's really like with a caret
Yes, yes,
as opposed to in the
100%.
margin.
Correct, but that is a margin.
Oh,
So,
okay. All right. It's a
okay, the,
margin.
the the point is that you can put the name exactly between lines, and so that way it would be exactly a little bit smaller maybe, and be able to do that. So yes, I don't mean in the sort of the margin, although we did talk about whether or not it would be it could be even just a marginal comment. That was noted as well, that whether or not you can go into the margins, because in some ways it doesn't make sense if you were to say you're if it's, you're not using any of the margin, then what does it mean to suspend part of the name? You're going to write just the yud and the k, and then you'll put the vav and the k on the next line. Then it's two separate words. So it doesn't. I understand that that's sort of like the literal read, but on some level, it's got to be at least somewhat in the margins between columns as well. Otherwise, it's hard to understand what exactly the case is of suspending the entire name, but not suspending part of the name. But in any event, the bottom line is that we reject that because we had other statements by people who noted the fact that the halacha is that you can suspend the name of Hashem and put it, again, as some kind of marginal comment, whether with a caret or between the lines or some way in the margin. But the bottom line is that we then went through four others. So we went through a total of five yesterday, and in each case, we rejected the possibility that this statement of that the statement made by Rabbi Chanina that specifically Rav and Bar Chinina said in the name of Ula, who said in the name of Rabbi Chanina, that in fact the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, not only in this particular instance, but wherever Rabbi Shimon Shazuri is taught. And so we're going to find two other places now, and we're going to begin with those two places. And both of them are valid locations, meaning that there is no reason to assume that it wasn't said in those places. So let's take a look and see what they are. We'll back up just a little bit to the second word on the last line of Lamed Bet, and we'll get the introduction to what those two could be, and then we'll go through them individually. Ella Amarav Papa Ashida. Rav Papa says that it's talking about some kind of chest. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Ayayin, and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says it's talking about the wine. And what are those halachas? Well, let's take a look. Rav Papa Amar, as we turn to Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, Ashida, it's talking about a chest. And Ditnan, because we have a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Kalim, Perek Yud Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Actually, it seems like it actually is, even though the Masoras Hashas says Yud Aleph, it seems like it's actually Yud Chet. Parak Yud Chet Mishnah Aleph. So Hashida, when it comes to this chest, so first of all, let's just back up and note what Masechet Kalim is talking about is when is a vessel considered a vessel such that it can become tameh. And so we're talking now about a large chest. So Beis Shammai Omrim Nimdedet Mibifnim. Beis Shammai says you measure the inside of the what it can hold. And if it can hold, and Rashi tells us, Damrinan Hasam, that we say over there, in the Mishnayos in Maseches Kalim, kaveret when it comes to a basket, hakash from made from straw, the kaveret hakanim or a reed basket, ubor sfina alexandrit, or you have a hold of a Alexandrian boat where basically it's some kind of crate that they would use, just as we today have crates that containers. It was their form of container ship, and so you would put the container in the boat, the shida, and then the chest that we're talking about, teva, a box, umigdal, or some kind of closet. Shemachzikin memsa, if it can hold 40 sa bilach of wet, of liquid, shehain korayim biyavish, which translates to being able to hold two core, which is actually 60 sa, so it's 150% biyavish, because when it comes to dry things, you can pile it above the rim. But when it comes to wet things, obviously you cannot. And so, as well, maybe you can pile it a little bit depending on the viscous nature of the liquid. But in any event, the bottom line is you can't pile it up the way you can pile, obviously, something that is solid. So if you can hold that amount of content, 40 sa of liquid or 60 or two core of dry, yotzu mitoras kli, it leaves the category of a vessel because it's effectively not movable, and therefore it's considered almost like it's attached to the ground, and therefore not actually capable of becoming tameh. Ve'ein mekablim tuma, it doesn't become tameh any longer. So that is how Beit
What's
Shammai
that?
measures. So Beit Shammai measures from the inside, meaning the walls don't
Hello?
count towards the volume. Go ahead. You have a question?
I didn't hear anything. I thought we lost the sound.
No, no, I'm speaking. Okay. Ubeit
No, I
Hillel.
believe, just to point you, I remember Kaveret as a beehive.
Yeah, that's because often, if you take a look at a beehive, it has a woven nature like a basket. So the same word is used for both. So that's I also was wondering about the word kaveret because it used in other contexts. But in the context in Maseches Kalim, it is definitely talking about a basket. Okay. So and Beis Hillel Omrim, back on second line, second word of Lamed Aleph Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Ubeit Hillel Omrim mi bachutz. No, you use the measurements based on the outer measurements, meaning the walls will count towards whether or not this is holding a 40 saw, and that's because the logic is that we're focused on the weight, and so as a result, who cares whether it's solid wall or not or airspace. The bottom line is that the wall itself counts towards the weight of the overall item. So as a result, we count it. Umodim. Now they all agree, meaning Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai agree. Elu ve'elu she'ein ove haraglayim ve'ove halavazvazin nimdad. That according to both of them, you will not count the legs and you will not count the lip of the container. Meaning, to the extent that you've got something raised above, or something that sticks out a little bit that creates a lip to the edge of the top of the chest, that is not going to count towards the volume. And similarly, the legs won't count. Rabbi Yossi disagrees somewhat. Modim she'ove haraglayim ba'ove halavaz v'zim nimdad. No, those still count meaning presumably this is within Beit Hillel that he would be saying this, but the bottom line is that those thicknesses are going to count because again, what we care about is the overall weight of the item, and so therefore they will count. Ubeineyen ein nimda. But you know what doesn't count? This airspace between them, because that airspace doesn't actually have any ability to hold anything. And how we get Rabbi Shimon Shazuri. What does Rabbi Shimon Shazuri say? Omer, im hayu raglayim gvoot tefach ein beinehen nimdad. You're right, Rabbi Yossi. If the legs are a tefach or greater than in height, then you're right that they don't measure. But ve'im la beinehem nimdad. But if they are less than a tefach high, then that airspace is measured, meaning that because the bottom of the chest is so close to the ground as it is, we will effectively say that we treat it as if the bottom is of the ground. And so as a result, if you have sort of like imagine a freezer chest, right? But to take out all the equipment, so it's just the chest. So then that would be measured all, and it goes all the way to the ground. So then maybe there's a thickness of the bottom, but it doesn't make a difference because the thickness is going to count towards us, and you would just measure its height, weight, width, and length, and you would calculate, does that hold 40 saw of liquid? If it does, then it's going to be not a kli. So Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, okay, so it is there that Rav Papa is saying that Rabbi Chanina issued his ruling regarding the statements of Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, saying that the halacha is like him. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Amar Ayayin, and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says it was about wine. And again, this is the second possible answer, and that we will not reject. Ditanan, because we have a Mishnah. There's a Mishnah in Tahorot, Mishnah Perek Gimel, Mishnah Bet. Rabbi Meir Omer Shemen Tchila Olam, that when it comes to Tuma, Shemen will always be a Rishon, meaning that if somebody who is a Sheni Latuma, something that is a Sheni Latuma, and touches the oil, the oil will immediately turn into a Rishon Latuma, even though you would have otherwise thought it would be a Shlishi. V'chachamim omrim af hadvash. Chachamim say no, it's not only true with oil, but it's even true with honey. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer af hayayin. And Shimon Shazuri says it's even wine. Now, let's take a look. Just at the Rashi Shemen Tchilal Olam Bein Shenitma Ba'avatuma O Berishon O B'Sheni Havi Ihu Rishon. It's going to constitute a Rishon Latuma Dekai Malan, because we say in Psachim Daf Yudalan Mabet Kol HaPosel as a Truma, anything that can cause Truma to become Tameh, and therefore cause it to be invalidated and therefore not edible by a Kohen. Mitame mashkin, it has the ability to cause liquids to become tameh. Liot chila, in order to become a rishon for tuma. B'shemen mashka, and what we're saying is oil is a liquid. So now the Gemara wonders. Back into the Gemara. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Second.
But he mentions truma. This would be in a case of truma with shlishi. Shlishi, right? Isn't that what shlishi is? It's in a case of truma and kodshim, revi. There's a revi and kodshim and shlishi and truma. Otherwise, we don't go beyond sheni, right?
Yes, that's correct. Correct. Well, truma we go beyond sheni, but one.
Truma is beyond sheni, but otherwise we don't chulin.
Correct. Exactly. That's what we're talking about. So now 10 lines down, middle of the line, miklal de tanakama savar yayin lo. The fact that you just said that Shimon Shazuri says that even wine, that implies that Rabbi Meir, when he says that oil is always a rishon, he would say that wine is not the case. Miklal Tanakama Savar Yayin Lo, is that possible? No, of course not. So Amo Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer Yayin. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri disagrees in the other direction. He says that only wine is the case where you would say that it's a liquid and therefore is going to be a rishon. But you would not say it with respect to oil and honey. Those are too much of a solid. Now, Tosos here. Well, let's actually take a first look at Rashi. Ela Ema Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer Yain Velo Shemen Vidrash, but not wine, but not oil and honey. Delo Havu Mashkin, because they would not be sufficiently liquid. Va'aha Ka'amar Rabbi Chanina Halacha Rabbi Shimon, and it was on this that again Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak is telling us that that's where Rabbi Chanina made his statement that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon Shazuri. Now, Tosos here points out, and this is the Tosos, Ema Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer Yayin, he points out that it cannot be that oil and even honey would be considered non-liquid in their general liquid state. And therefore, if you take a look at the second to one, I guess one, two, three, five lines down in the widest lines of the Tosos, middle of the line, it says Batiritz Rabbeinu Tam. And so as a result, the Rabbeinu Tam says, Tahachim Mayri Bikarush. We're talking about where it is solidified. And so as a result, that's the situation where we would say that when it comes to wine, Shimon Shazuri would say even in that situation it would stay tamei. Whereas when it comes to oil and honey, if those had solidified, then Rabbi Shimon Shazuri would say that they are no longer tamei. We no longer apply the principle of that a mashka is a rishon. And so, and that, at least makes some sense because, again, throughout Shas, it seems like we're always treating oil and honey as liquids. And, indeed, they are among the seven liquids that can make something capable, make fruit capable of becoming makabel tuma. So it makes a lot of sense to try and qualify what we're talking about because we're saying that the halacha is like Shimon Shazuri, and yet the Gemara throughout the Shas seems to indicate that oil is a liquid and dvash is a liquid. So
But he
that
goes
is
on, doesn't
an
he? In that
important
little bit of Tosfos.
What was that?
In that Tosfos, I'm just looking at it quickly. Reishi Hashemen v'achalav shel grisin bizman she'em lachim harihein rishonim. Right?
Yes, exactly. Everybody, even Shimon Shazuri, would agree that when it comes to oil and honey, when they are actually liquid, they will be considered as liquid, and that this is a debate only in the context of what happens when they become solidified.
Solidified. Quite
Exactly.
good.
Okay. All right. So now we're second to last word on the 6th, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11th line down in the Gemara. So Tanya. So now we have, having mentioned a series of Mishnaic rulings by Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, the Gemara mentions a brisa with another ruling of Rabbi Shimon Shazuri and wonders whether the halacha follows him in this case as well. Meaning, Rabbi Chanina told us that the halacha is always like him, but was he saying that the halacha is always like him only when he's in a Mishnah or even when he's in a brisa? So Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, Pam achas nisarav li tevel bechulin. There was one time where I had tevel mixed with chulin, and Rashi tells us. Rashi offers two different explanations, but we'll follow the second of the explanations. So take a look at the third to last narrow line, last word on the line, Venira. Venira be'enai shah tevel azeh, that the tevel that we're talking about in this case is tevel gamor. It is a mixture of it is the untithed produce that we have that has never, it's not actually a mixture, it's just untithed produce that we have that was completely untied. Haya. The kevan shenisara b'chulin, and now that gets mixed in with chulin, meaning it gets mixed in with post-tithe produce. So batel it becomes nullified because assuming that the chulin is a more. Because from the Torah, 1 in 2, 1 in a majority, is going to be nullified. Pater midoraisa. And therefore, from a biblical perspective, this tevel that is in this mixture is no longer obligated to take trumas and maestros from it. V'rabbananhu to Amar Bey, but the rabbis are the ones. I'm sorry, the Achmor Bey. They're the ones who say that we should be stringent. V'amur, and they say tevel asur b'mashu, that we're going to say that tevel is prohibited even in a mixture with any amount of content, and that's because of the concept of a davar sheyesh lo matirin eino batel. That's something that has the ability of becoming, permitted, is not going to be nullified. V'hitzrichu lahafrish alav truma, and so as a result, we do need to take truma from it. Umiyu mineu bay lo, but we can't take truma from this mixture itself. The chulin mitukanin, because the chulin is already fixed. It's already proper. Niftaru lagamri. It is not subject to the obligation for truma at all. And so as a result, you cannot take truma from that. There isn't even a rabbinic obligation. So as a result, so now back into the Gemara.
Which
And
Rashi was that? I
this was,
didn't.
again, this was the middle of a Rashi. We began with the last word on the third to last narrow line of Rashi on Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. Okay, and now we go back into the Gemara, and Rabbi Shimon Shaziri is telling us he had this tevel that got mixed with chulin, and what happened? First word on the line, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down in the Gemara. Ubati v'sha'alti es Rabbi Tarfon, and I came and I asked Rabbi Tarfon what I should do. V'amrli, and he told me, Lech kach lecha min hashuk, v'aser alav. Go buy from the marketplace, and you'll then be able to take the tithes from it. So Rashi back again. We'll first do the Rashi up above. Now this Rashi going up from the bottom of the narrow lines. It's 6, 9, 12, about 15 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. Kach min hashuk. Demai, go and buy Demai. Demai is where you're not sure because it was owned by an Am Haaretz. You're not sure whether the tithes were taken. Kach min hashuk Demai me'am haaretz. Go buy from somebody who isn't so knowledgeable in the marketplace. The produce where we have to be concerned that maybe the tithes and specifically the maestros weren't taken. Dahavi number nami pater midoraisa. That also is exempt from tithes biblically. Al hapater doraisa. And so we can use that to then exempt ourselves from something else where it was pater midoraisa. So again, you would go and buy new grain from the same year as the grain that got mixed up, that was tevel, that got mixed up with your chulin, and you would go and buy this demai, and you would say, I am taking trumas and maestros from this demai, or maybe just even maestros, because often we say that demai you only need to take maestros. But the bottom line is you would take the trumas and maestros from this, and you would have in mind that it would fulfill your obligation with respect to the tevel that was within your mixture, because you can't take from the tevel because you don't know whether any particular grain is tevel or not. So you would have to take from something else that was from that same year, and then that would fulfill your obligation for being, and now you'd be able to eat the entire mixture. So take a look at Rashi again. Now take a look at a second Rashi, third line in the widest lines of the bottom of Rashi. V'amarli, and he said to me, this is essentially re-quoting the Gemara and further qualifying it in the explanation that the second explanation that Rashi is offering. Say v'kach min hashuk, go out and buy from the marketplace. V'aser alav, and take the maestros on it. Lefi cheshbon tevel, including as necessary for the tevel shabo that you have mixed up. Kasavar rov amei haaretz masrin hein, and because most of them do take meiser. Evahavalei pater midoraisa v'chayim midirabanan kihai. And now what you end up with is you have a mixture that you have a separate group of something that is chayiv dirabanan, and you have your mixture that is chayev derabanan, and you can use the mix, the what you buy in the marketplace that's chayev derabanan to exempt you from the mixture that is chayev derabanan. So and so back into the Gemara. So second line, we're now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines up from the bottom of the daf. Kasavar yesh kinyan. All right. I'm sorry. It's a little bit further up. Four more lines up, so that's 14 lines up. Kasavar de oraisa beruba batel. Maybe it's 16 lines up. So kasavar de oraisa beruba batel, because according to Rabbi Tarfon, he would say that biblically you have, since it fell into rov chulin, it's not going to be obligated, it's going to be nullified, and therefore you won't have any obligation. V'rov amayaretz masrinain, and most people who are amaretzes actually do take tithes. V'havele ketorim mina patur ala patur, and so as a result, you're taking truma from something that is biblically non-liable but rabbinically liable, from something else that's biblically non-liable, which is rabbinically liable, and therefore that's going to be valid. So why not just tell the guy to buy from a non-Jew? Why did you need to tell him to buy demai? So kasavar ein kinyan la'ovid kochavim be'eretz Yisrael lafkia miyad meiser. Well, that is because Rabbi Tarfon believes that a non-Jew cannot own land in Israel in a manner that would prevent it from being subject to meiser. And so as a result, what you would buy would be obligated biblically, and therefore you would not be able to take meiser from it to fulfill the obligation with respect to the tevel that was mixed with chulin, which is not biblically required any longer. So, Ika Amri, there's another view of this entire discussion that goes in the exact opposite direction. Amar Le, that Rabbi Tarfon said to Rishim Shinzuri, Lech kach min ha'oved kochavim, go buy from a non-Jew. And why did he tell him to buy from a non-Jew? That's because kasavar kinyan lo'oved kochavim be'eretz Yisrael lafkia miyad meiser. He believed that in fact a non-Jew could do a kinyan and could prevent the land from being obligated on trumas and maasros, and therefore v'havale mina patur ala patur. And so, as a result, when you buy it from him, now there is a rabbinic obligation, and so you can use that rabbinic obligation to fulfill your rabbinic obligation with respect to the mixture of tevel and chulin. So 1 second, if in fact Rabbi Tarfon told him to go to the marketplace, to go to buy from a non-Jew, why not just let him buy from the marketplace, and he'll buy demai, and he'll use that as the same method? So kasavar ein rov amei haaretz masrin. According to this view, Rabbi Tarfon would say that most amei haaretz do not tithe their produce, and therefore the obligation of demai is actually a biblical obligation, and therefore you would be biblically liable to take that, and you would not therefore be able to use demai to take based on tevel. So Shalach le Rav Yemar bar Shalemya le Rav Papa, and so Rav Yemar sends to Rav Papa, Hada Amar Ravin bar Chinana, Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Chanina. So 1 second, when we had that statement by Rabbi Chanina, Halacha ka Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, V'lo od Elakol Makom Sheshana Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Halacha Kamoso, Af benis Arev le Tevel bechulin. Is it also in this case of this mixture? So Amar Le, Rav Papa responds, yes, absolutely. And Amar Rav Ashi says, Amar Li Marzutra pointed out, Kashiba Rabbi Chanina Mesura. It seems that Rabbi Chanina from Surah had a question about that. Because Pshita, it should be obvious that the statement that Rabbi Chanina made would apply to even this case. Because as we turn to Lamed Aleph Amabet, Mika Amar b'Mishnasenu, did Rabbi Chanina say that it was specifically in our Mishnayos that in fact this statement was true? No. Kol makom shishana kamar. He was saying anywhere where it's taught. And so as a result, anywhere would include a brisa, and therefore the halacha would be like Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, even in this brisa case. Okay, so that now brings us back to the laws of a Sefer Torah. Right, that we had come to this based on the statement of Shimon Shazuri about the name of Hashem in the margin or between the lines, so to speak. And so now we come back to it, and we have Amar. I will note that the Masoras Hashas changes Ze'era to Ze'iri here to be consistent in the two statements. We're going to see a second statement from Ze'iri in the name of Rav Chananel in the name of Rav. So let's do that. So Amar of Ze'iri, Amar of Chananel, Amar Rav. So what was said in the name of Rav? Kera haba b'shnei shitin. If you have a tear that goes two lines into the writing, Yispor, you're allowed to sew it back up. Right? Take a look at Rashi, top Rashi, or top line in Rashi on Lamed Aleph on Bet. Kara, end of the line. Kara haba b'shnei shitin. Im niskara gilyon shel sefer Torah. If the tear goes into the language of the Sefer Torah, v'nichnas hakra b'shnei shitin, and it goes into two lines, b'toch haksav, where it's written, yitbor, then you can sew it up. And there's a question of whether you have to sew it up or you can sew it up. That's not necessarily so clear. But in any event, b'shalosh al yitbor. But once you go into three, you cannot, as Rashi says, b'shalosh al yitbor, ella yisalik es hayiriya. You have to remove and replace the entire sheet. So Amarle Rabba Zuti le Rav Ashi. So Rav Zuti said to Rav Ashi, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah medifti mishmei derava. That when Rabbi Yirmiyah didn't, so Rabbi Yirmiyah said in the name of Rava, Had Amrina b'shalosh al yispor. When we say that three lines you don't sew it up, lo aman belatikta. It's talking about an old Torah. Aval chaditza, but if it's then if it's a new Torah, leislanba, then that would not be an issue. Below atikta, atikta mamish. And when we say old, we don't mean literally old. Below chadita, chadita mamish. And when we say new, we don't mean literally new. Elaha delo afitzan had afitzan. But rather, whether it's old or new is based on whether it was treated with what they define here as gallnut juice. So the point is that and so it would help fix the cloth. And according to Rashi, old means that it was treated, and new means that it was not treated. So as a result, that's the situation where only if it was treated with this gallnut juice, then if it went into three lines, would you not sew it up? But otherwise, you would sew it up even for a longer tear. And when we say that you have to sew it up, it means sewing it up with gid, with sinews. Aval begradin lo, but not with some kind of thread. So by Rav Yehuda bar Abba, Rav Yehuda bar Abba asked, Bein daf ladaf, bein shita lashita, so what happens if the tear doesn't go through the lines with words? Meaning if it goes along a column or across a row, and what then? So are you allowed to repair such a tear? So Teku, that is unresolved. And the question is understood, right? If we take a look at Rashi, Ben Daf Ladaf, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Im nikra ad keneged haksav sheilu haya biksav haya yoter megimel shitin. Clearly, if it was less than 2 lines worth, well, then of course you can sew it up. But here we're dealing with it when it was more than 3 lines worth of length. And so as a result, in that situation, do we still say that you can repair it or not? Okay. And the answer is Teku. The Gemara doesn't answer. Okay. And just continuing on, Bein Shita Lashita, when it's talking about between lines, in Nikra Yitfor Olo Yitfor. Again, if it was torn in that manner, do we repair it or not? And again, the answer for both of those cases is Teku. So Amar Rabbi Zeiri, Amar Rav Chananel, Amar Rav. Again, a second statement by Zeiri in the name of Rabbi Chananel, in the name of Rav. Mezuzah. So now we'll change to mezuzah, and we're going to have two halachot of mezuzot now, and we'll come a third one, another one, God willing, at the start of the day tomorrow. So Amar Rabbi Zeiri, Amar Rav Chananel, Amar Rav, mezuzah sheksava shtayim shtayim. If you write a mezuzah in very narrow columns with two words in each line, kshera, it is kosher. As Rashi says, shtayim shtayim, shitos kitzoros. That very short rows. Shita, shita, bashte tevot, with each row being two words. So you can imagine the one word would be aligned with the right column. The second word would be aligned with the left column, and you'd write it down throughout the column, and you'd have one long column. So iboilahu shtayim v'shalos. So kshera, that is considered kosher. Iboilahu. So they asked another question. Shtayim v'shalosh v'achas mahu. What if you have two and then three and then one, right? So then, Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Kol Shekain Sha'asa Kol Shekain. It's certainly going to be kosher. Sha'asa Kashira, because you've just made it like a poem, right? The way that a song, like we have Az Yashir, you have, and that's a kosher. 1 second, is it really kosher to do a non-song like the Shema that is in a mezuzah, and to write it like a song like Az Yashir? We have a brisa that says Meisve. So we have Meisve. They challenge Asa Kashira, Oshira Kamosa. If you make a non-poem part, like a non-song part like a song, or a song like the rest of the Torah, psula, it's invalid. So doesn't that show that you can't do it? So no, ki tanya ahi b'sefer Torah. When that was taught about a sefer Torah. Okay, itmar nami. So it was said also. So again, if you have two words on a line, then three words on a line, and then one word on a line, that's going to be kosher. But Amar Rabba Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the Amre la Amar Rav Acha bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So one of two people said this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Mezuzah she'asa shtayim v'shalosh v'achas kshera. 2, 3, 1 is kosher. Ubilvad shelo ya'asena kekuba. But the key is you can't make it like a tent. What does it mean? Shelo ya'asena kekuba. Take a look at Rashi. It's basically the middle of Rashi in terms of the narrow lines, and it's got a diagram in the Rashi where you have 1 at the top, 2 in the middle, 3 in the bottom. Shelo yaseh kekuba kizeh. It's like where you have 1 word, then 2 words, and 3 words. Ka'ohel rachav milamata v'katzar milamala. It's like a tent where it's wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. Dahainu acha shtayim shalosh, which 1, 2, 3. Now, it doesn't mean literally 1, 2, 3 and then 1, 2, 3, because that would be similar to the 2, 3, 1 case. What we're talking about is where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or however many words. But the point is that it continually gets wider and wider and wider as you go to the bottom of the document. That is what is not kosher. And indeed, we, by the way, paskin like that you cannot make a mezuzah in that triangle shape. And similarly, uvilvad shelo yasena kizanav. And similarly, you can't make it like a tail. And Rashi tells us kizanav shalosh shtayim acha kazeh, where you have 3, 2, 1, meaning that you begin with the widest line and then you narrow it. So that both of those, whether it's an upside down pyramid or a right side up pyramid, that is not going to be a kosher manner for writing a mezuzah. But if you have 2, 3, 1, meaning that it gets wider and narrower and wider and narrower, that is going to be okay. And indeed, that actually is brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Amar Rav Chisda al haaretz b'shita achrona. Now, the last 2 words of a mezuzah are al haaretz, because we say the pasuk is Laman Yerbuya Mechem Al Adama Asher Nishba Hashem, etc., Al Haaretz. And so that's the end of that sentence. So Bishita Achrona, that if that can be a last line by itself, is what Rav Chisda says. Now, Ikad Amri Besov Shita. Some people say that it should go at the end of the last line, meaning if you have the full line here, so the last, even though ordinarily you begin Hebrew on the right side of the page, here you could put the Al Haaretz on the left, at the left column, at the left edge, and we'll see why in just a moment. Whereas and others say no, you have to put it at the beginning of the line. So why do we have these two different opinions? So Manda Amar Besov Shita, the one who says that you put it at the end of the line, Kigavoa Shamayim Al Haaretz. Well, we have this pasuk in Tehillim. Perek Kaf Gimel Pasuk Yud Aleph, Kuf Gimel, excuse me, that Perek Yud Aleph, Pasuk Yud Aleph, excuse me. So there it says, like the height of the heaven over the earth. Meaning, what are the words that would be immediate? What's the last word in the second to last line? It's the word Shemayim, because it says the pasuk has the word Shemayim right before Al Haaretz, and so right Latei Lahem Kimei HaShemayim Al Haaretz, and so as a result, the point is that we want the word Shemayim to be literally over the Aretz, and that's what we're getting if we put the Al Haaretz at the end of the line. Umanda Amar B'tchila Shita, and the one who says no, put it at the beginning of the line. Ki hechi demirchaka shamayim me'aretz. Well, then we want to make the shamayim as far away from the aretz as possible, right? Because Umanda Amar B'tchila Shita. Take a look at Rashi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from the bottom of the narrow lines of Rashi. Kilomar by aruchuke. Eretz mishamayim. We want to cause the Eretz to be as far away from Shemayim as possible. Dahachi mashma, because here's what's implied by it. Ki heichi demirchaka Shemayim and Eretz. Just as the heaven is very far from the land. Kain ye'erichu yamechem. That so too you should have extended days. So the point is that it's almost like an analogy or a metaphor for how long should the Leman Yerbu Yemechem be. It should be as long as the distance between the land is from heaven, and so that is the explanation. We're a little bit ahead of time, so let's just do we'll at least start the next little bit. And we'll probably go back and do it again. But all right, so let's just say the next halacha, and we'll pause there. So Amar Rabbi Chelbo Chazina le Rav Huna decharich la me'echad klape shma. That I saw, Rav Chelbo says, I saw that Rav Huna would roll the mezuzah. We of course know that our mezuzahs are rolled, right? You're not supposed to have it out facing forward so that you see the Shema on it, but rather you roll it so that the Shema is inside the roll and not outside. And then you would roll it from the left edge to the right edge. So basically, if you were to unroll it, the first words that you would see are the right-hand column, which has the word Shema in it. The osa parashoseh stumos, and you're going to make the paragraphs closed. And Rashi understands that. What does that mean? That you're going to make the paragraphs closed? That mean I'm sorry. That the idea is that you would have no. It wouldn't look like a paragraph. You might have a break in the middle of a line, but you would not begin v'hayayim shamoa on a new line that unless the first paragraph of Shema ended at the end of the prior line. So it would not look like two paragraphs. It would look like one paragraph. Now we're going to challenge that in a moment, because we're going to see a brisa that seems to suggest otherwise, but we'll begin, God willing, with that challenge God willing, tomorrow. But let's do just one more Rashi. The karich la me'echad klape shma. La'achar shenichtava. After this is the three lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. Now two lines up. La'achar shenichtava. After it's been written, kofla. We're going to roll it up. Mitzad small from the left hand side. Litzad yamin to the right hand side. Kishehenicha bedelet. When you're going to then put it on the door post. V'hainu me'echad klape shma, and that's going from the echad to the shma. Sharosh hashura shma Yisrael, because the beginning of the line is shma Yisrael. V'sofa Hashem echad, and the end of that line is Hashem echad. V'hilchil kofla me'echad, and so we begin to roll from the echad. V'kipal uba ad shma, and then you roll and you roll and you eventually get to the word shma. All right, so we'll pick up, God willing, from there tomorrow. Looking forward to continuing.
I have a question.
Please.
The when we were learning this whole section about what was it? The section with
Sefer Torah?
no, Shazuri and the
Oh, Shazuri,
Yayin
uh-huh.
and the Amaretz. I researched. I didn't. I'd still like to know what the Dibur Matchil of that Rashi is. I searched all over on this stuff, and maybe I
So it's not the Dibur Makil of the Rashi that gives the second explanation is Ein Rov Ame Haaretz Ma'asrin. Ein Rov Ame Haaretz Ma'asrin. But it's not. But he goes through he's continuing in the first understanding where he thinks that maybe that what got mixed up was not pure traditional Tevel, but it was Demai Tevel. And so that was his original interpretation. And then he says, Vikashali, it's difficult for me. And then he goes on and says, I don't understand how that could work. And so as a result, he says, Vinir Ba'anishat Tevel as a Tevel Gomer. And so then he goes back and he essentially gives an alternative explanation from what he had said in the Divrei Hamaskils that come before. And so effectively, even though there's no separate Divrei Hamaskil for in the Rashi, he effectively creates them, or we can create them by taking a look at the specific wording and then putting in the breaks there in order to cover the alternative explanation that he gives. So again, take a look at it's the last Rashi that begins in the narrow lines of Rashi, but the part that's relevant is the part that begins Venera, which should be the last word on the third to last narrow line.
that's worth it because the Rashi that was directly related to that was
Correct. That the Rashi that
Nitarev
was directly related says
Nitarev
specifically that it was
Tevel.
Demai. Right. It says if you take a look at the Rashi Nisarav Tevel, he says Demai Bechulin. It says that it's a
Right.
mixture of Demai and Chulin. But again, later on, because of the issue that Rashi has, it makes a lot more sense to go with his second explanation, and that's why I effectively skipped to the second explanation, which is at the Nira Be'enai, again, third to last line and second to last line of the
Now
narrow
I
line
see it. Yeah,
in
because it said
Menachot.
Nitarevli. I'm looking for it in Nitarevli Tevel.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why I made sure to say that you have to go to the third to last line because it's not because again initially Rashi gives an alternative explanation, but then Rashi effectively questions that and offers what he considers his preferred explanation. It's sometimes Rashi offers his preferred explanation first. Here he's offering it second, so it's a little confusing to follow.
But
All right.
so that's in this section of the Ein Rov Ameretz Maschrin. Is that a continuation? I didn't read that. Is that a continuation of his first explanation?
Yes, that's a continuation of
Besaptekin.
his first explanation
Wow.
until you get to Vikashili, and then he asks his question. I don't understand how this could all work, and so as a result, then he goes Venera Be'enai, and he gives his preferred explanation, and effectively undoes the explanation of everything that came before, and so that's why I jumped to that alternative explanation rather than give the explanation that in the end Rashi
He
does not
says
request.
Kashali.
Yes, it says if you take a look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up in the narrow lines of
Oh,
Rashi, it says
Vakashali.
Vikashali. Okay.
Imken.
Exactly, exactly.
And then
All
his second
right.
instrument. Okay, and okay, I have to listen to it again. And
Okay. Have a wonderful day. Looking forward to continuing our learning tomorrow.